Welcome to Hometown Happenings. I'm Carol McCarthy here at the Tamarac National Wildlife Refuge with Wayne Brenniger. He is a wildlife biologist, and we're talking about climate change today. And you know, this is January here, and it is a very warm day. We've had a very mild January this year. But Wayne, you are involved, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is involved in studying climate change, I understand?
Yes, we are. Obviously, climate change can have some huge ramifications on wildlife that we try to manage for and the habitats we manage. So actually we're in the process as an agency to just kind of look forward to the future, start to determine what is our vision for climate change in the future. How are we going to manage wildlife in the face of a oncoming onset of rapid climate change.
Okay, and how does one go about studying this? I mean, you obviously have to study wildlife, the effects of it on wildlife, also the effects of it on the natural surroundings. Is that true?
That's correct. Basically, what we're looking here from a Tamarac standpoint is the first thing you need to do is really think about how climate change might affect different species and species groups and the ecosystems themselves. Obviously, the wildlife themselves are going to respond to changes in the environmental conditions around, particularly vegetation changes, aquatic or wetland type changes, hydrology, etc. So we all know pretty much that climate is one of the major drivers for the way our habitats are established here throughout the United States and anywhere in the world. Climate is really the key factor pushing a lot of this.
All right, and so is it have you determined yet if it is actually climate change or just a phase we're going through? I know I've heard that argument a few times.
There is quite a bit of arguments, and I think some of the leading scientists that were originally against some of the climate change talk are now coming back out and kind of giving them a rebuttal of their original statements and kind of beginning to believe a little bit more in climate change. I think there's a lot of varying opinions on climate change, but it's hard to fight with when you look at the last 10 years. 6 or 8 of the last 10 years have been our warmest, at least in our area, in the last several 100 years or so since climate data has been collected here by the National Weather Service.
All right, and are there some findings locally that are associated with climate change that you're able to tell us, or are those? Is the jury still out on that as well?
Well, I think one of the things is that we expect climate change to occur over a pretty rapid period of time, 50 years or so, or maybe even sooner. Some of those impacts may already be occurring, and that we're just maybe starting to begin to determine those. And a lot of us are probably familiar in hearing about the polar bears in the Arctic right now and some of the issues going on with that. We've become part of a research node with Terrestrial Wetland Global Change Network. It's kind of a mouthful of words, but it's a group of scientists, researchers across the U.S. and Canada, and what we're looking at is a combination of biotic and abiotic factors. The biotic factors obviously being the critters themselves, the wildlife, the birds and the amphibians that are out there, and then the abiotic is changes in weather patterns, precipitation, drying patterns, the amount of rain we receive, how much we receive at a given time. So obviously there's a variety of environmental factors that we're trying to manage and look for and just simply monitor. And once we have a handle on that, we are trying to take a look at how maybe we can mitigate those negative impacts to wildlife.
All right, and do you have some equipment here today to show us?
I do.
All right. We'll take a break, and when we come back on Hometown Happenings, Wayne Brenniger will show us the equipment used to measure some of the changes and study the climate change here on Hometown Happenings. Welcome back to Hometown Happenings. I'm Carol McCarthy here at Tamarac National Wildlife Refuge with Wayne Brenniger, the wildlife biologist. We're talking about climate change, and I've asked Wayne to talk a little bit about the equipment they use to study climate change.
Well, a couple of the units that we have here, what I'm holding in my hands here is what's called an acoustic recording unit. An ARU is what we often refer to them as. And these units are deployed out, there's 10 sites on the refuge around pre-selected wetlands, and we put them out in the same locations on a yearly basis to monitor phenological changes primarily of amphibians that might be calling, or frogs, and the timing of that. And then also bird phenology, when the birds are calling and so forth. And we try to relate that to changes in the vegetation patterns, leaf out and things like that. One thing about phenology changes that we're concerned about, particularly with with frogs and other species is that the hydro period. Many of our wetlands are temporary wetlands that these frogs are utilizing, particularly the wood frog, and they utilize it for a short period of time, and then they utilize the uplands around it. And so what we're looking at from that standpoint is our hydro period is it becoming drier earlier in the year, and that could have significant ramifications on amphibian populations. Likewise, we're doing the same thing with the bird populations, and we're trying to utilize that as the biotic factor, but we also have temperature loggers and water level loggers, which you're holding there, Carol. And the temperature loggers we're using to simply monitor air temperature and water temperature, and then obviously you have in your right hand there is what's called a water level logger, and that helps us monitor the different water levels. And these are deployed out in the field with PVC pipe, so we only have parts of the components with us today. And we take that information and we compare it with satellite imagery that's being analyzed by some of our colleagues within the network out of South Dakota. AROS, it's a remote imaging or sensing station. It's one of the world-renowned areas for remote sensing specialists. So we're compiling that data, comparing it, and we're able to use ground truthing as a comparison. And these locations are distributed all the way from essentially Tennessee all the way through up to Alaska, along a huge biome change from grassland to forest landscapes.
All right. Is this data available to like the general public, say, or is it so scientific that we wouldn't be able to understand it?
Part of it is probably fairly scientific, a lot of detail. We have a website that we're hoping here shortly to put out published information on it. It's a good site for the public to go. One of the things that we have posted on there is some information just directly related to Tamarac as one of the key sites that managers can use the information for. But we also have a 5-minute segment on there that relates to a 5-minute calling period in the morning, one of the mornings here in June, I believe, of 2009.
Okay, all right, very good. Do you have some more equipment to show us?
I think this is primarily most of the equipment we have.
Well, this seems almost very simple equipment to study such a big thing.
It is. In relative terms, it's really simple, but it's yet quite high-tech and cutting-edge technology, particularly when we take this information and we tie it towards the satellite imagery that's available to us. It's really pretty cutting-edge.
And a lot of it is just time spent observing and the day-to-day observance of wildlife and nature.
That's a big part of it. Obviously, these units are designed to come on every 5 minutes on the hour and run for 5 minutes and then turn off to capture a period of segment in time. Now, if we were to pay, obviously, a biologist to sit out there, they might fall asleep after about a couple days' work there, and we might not be able to monitor every calling period that's in a 24-hour day.
All right. That's what interns are for?
That's what interns are for. We can put them to work with the bugs.
All right. Very good. I'm here with Wayne Brenniger. He is at the Tamarac National Wildlife Service here just north of Detroit Lakes. He's a wildlife biologist talking about climate change. And Wayne, I'm sure you're continuing on. What do you have to say about this winter?
Well, it's obviously been a different winter for us here with temperatures well above the 30s in January. It's quite surprising. So I think it's kind of just an indication of maybe things to come.
All right. Either way, I'll take it. All right, Wayne, thank you so much for visiting with me today on Hometown Happenings. For Hometown Happenings on TV3, I'm Carol McCarthy.